Hello, I'm Joey Cokeless. This is my presentation, Post-Fire Foliar Changes in Big Basin Sequoia sempervirens, an attempt to quantify leaf area index and other factors which aid in biomass estimation and future growth for coast redwood, Sequoia sempervirens. In August of 2020, the CZU fire was started by multiple lightning strikes throughout the Santa Cruz Mountains. Due to hot and dry conditions, the fire spread quickly, often with devastating results. In what was previously unimaginable circumstance, the fire blazed through the canopies of old-growth redwoods, torching their leaves and thus reducing their ability to photosynthesize. Incredibly, most have survived and have begun resprouting their leaves. Here I seek to examine stands in close proximity to Big Basin State Park headquarters. Here we have a Google Earth Engine time lapse showing land changes, including fires prior to the CZU fire, but none nearly as large, as you can see from that large brown mass. The main hypothesis tested in my project regards the correlation between NDVI, or Normalized Difference Vegetation Index, and LAI, Leaf Area Index. For the sake of good science, I will lay this out in the form of the null hypothesis. There is no strong correlation between NDVI and LAI for mature redwood forests. Leaf area index is quantified as leaf area in meters squared per meter square of ground area. LAI will be estimated in classes up to 10 as no extra photosynthesis and thus reflectance is likely to occur after 10, especially when measured from directly overhead. Some old growth redwoods can have an LAI over 20, while at the stand level, LAI can be up to 19, including understory trees. Here's a general model of NDVI versus LAI. You can see at first there isn't a huge jump in LAI as NDVI increases, but then as NDVI values increase and begin to plateau, LAI estimations begin to rise very quickly. This is likely untrue for the species that we are looking at here. NDVI is calculated as NAR minus R divided by NAR plus R, where NIR is a near infrared band and R is red light. The concept behind NDVI is that chlorophyll in plants absorbs red light but not near infrared, and thus healthy vegetation will not reflect red light but will reflect NIR, which is detected by various remote sensing devices. While NDVI values near 0 represent bare soil, higher positive values represent denser vegetation, which can include forests. Negative values can represent snow or water. So here we have my CZU map with an NDVI from 2020 pre-fire. The bright whites represent high reflectance, whereas black represents bare soil. So in these white areas, we are having all of the red light absorbed while still having near infrared reflected. For a detailed map centered around the Big Basin region of interest, see the following web map, the CZU post-fire map. In the CZU post-fire map, I've made layers you can toggle on and off to view data sets of the same type for both 2020 and 2022. For instance, here we have NAIP color infrared, and you can turn on the whole layer and then turn on one at a time and view the bottom layer, which is 2022, by toggling off 2020. So you'll be able to see what high reflectance at color infrared looks like, and then when the foliage has burned off. And I've done the same for NDVI, canopy cover, and the canopy height models. Canopy cover and canopy height are both derived from LiDAR. The RGB imagery is just aerial imagery, whereas down here we have fine scale vegetation map, which includes where different species live. I had originally started with a 30 by 30 meter data set from Landsat, which I switched out for the NAIP 60 by 60 because it's much finer resolution. I clipped all the layers near Big Basin headquarters near Boulder Creek and derived NDVI from the NAIP color infrared layers. So then I took the statistics for the NDVI from 2020. You can see that there are many pixel values in the higher range, and then we go to 2022 and we can see many of these pixels have now moved into the lower range. We're even getting some negative values down here, which could be something like ash. NDVI values by pixel, and we even have the mean, which dropped from 0.46 to 0.1, roughly 0.14. So I also downloaded the Pacific Veg Map that I was talking about earlier, which includes the fine scale vegetation. And then on top of that, I brought in a LiDAR-based canopy height model. And so in ArcGIS Pro, I was able to create bins for different LAI estimates based on the regression model from earlier. And basically what I found was that these areas of high reflectance of LAI were almost completely useless for deriving the high LAI that we see in redwoods. While it says 10 here, that was really kind of a hopeful estimate uh, because as I could see from the NDVI values derived up here, some of these white spots were in hardwood forests, and those correspond with my blue over here. And unfortunately, those corresponded with species that cannot put on that high of an LAI. As we can see, Douglas fir are incapable of achieving LAI near redwood, as their old growth LAI is often in the 8 range, while redwood is consistently over 16. While proving this null hypothesis, it is nonetheless disappointing to not have an easy metric by which to quantify LAI in redwoods. While high NDVI values do not increase with known high LAI in redwoods, NDVI can still work alongside other data types to validate other models of estimating LAI. Allometric equations have been developed for use in remote sensing to estimate biomass partitioning for both second growth and old growth sequoia using crown area and height as the main parameters. And then they can derive things like leaf area index and leaf mass from these. The equations tend to work much better for second growth trees than old growth because the canopy blocks LiDAR from sensing the main trunk, and ancient redwoods have massive trunks regardless of increase in crown area. So here we can see a graph from Sillette's work. We have the high points of these trees, and then we have their corresponding crown areas. And they've developed equations by which to estimate crown volume. And by estimating crown volume, one can estimate leaf area index. So we can use the NDVI taken at the same time as these LiDAR derivatives to at least validate whether or not that much crown area is really still alive. This is mostly going to be used in post-fire scenarios. So by using a combination of their previous crown areas and their heights, um, we can make pretty good estimates using equations as to leaf area and thus future growth, such as mean annual increment, which is how much biomass trees are putting on per year.